All right, so thumbs up emoji is a good way to do this. If I see you and you just wave or you give me a thumbs up, that's great. Otherwise, you can give me the thumbs up emoji. I know we like that. I need to get better at using it, but if I see you, you can go like that. Otherwise, you can just indicate with the thumbs up emoji that you have a still life that you're looking at, right? So everybody that's looking at a still life now that you set up gives me the thumbs up, and then we can move over to sharing the screen. Close things that the tablet always wants to open up. And whoa, look at that. What have we here? But, some reminders. Okay, because I talked in great detail, but here's you always know if it's on the dry erase board that it's good, and you've got this already. I have to move this out of the way. But last time, if you make these 4, 5, 6, 7 times, it wouldn't hurt, because this is almost like, boy, look at that glare that's coming from the light on the shiny surface of the dry erase board. So general to the specific, we really worked hard to try to adopt that as a philosophy and as a way of approaching drawing. And I got into my kind of slightly facetious, like, well, it can't be that simple kind of little thing that I do in talking about it, that general to the specific means big stuff down to little stuff, essences before details, large shapes, work your way down to small. Okay, so a couple of different times I've drawn these little diagrams, start with your big shapes. Shapes of what? There's what's not on this dry erase board that I'll move in a minute. Shape of what? Someone? Where's Huron? I know you're there. Tell me. There's a sticker on the line.
Oh, me?
No, I said Huron, but
Sorry.
whoever, anybody that knows it can tell me. Shape of what? Value, right? Value, which is a shade of gray, right? So essentially, over and over, as I talked last night, comes down to two things. What shape do I see? How light or how dark? So today, when we draw, we'll just try to forget everything else, nice and zen-like, and just as we look over and over at the still life that we've set up, which I'm hoping you put something behind it. Do you have, maybe I'll get some thumbs up indicators here. Do you have a backdrop of some kind? Did you put a backdrop or a dark backdrop, or did you position? Yeah, there's one. Okay. Not that you have to, but it could certainly help. This can be done on newsprint. This little subtractive drawing. So if you want to grab some newsprint, that's what I've got here. This is newsprint. If you want to grab your newsprint tablet and put it in front of you to follow along, that's cool. If you want to just take notes and try all of this later, That's cool. Although I think it can be great to just, yeah, grab your newsprint. Why not? You can take notes and then play around with newsprint at the same time. Sure, sure. No reason not to. Okay, so have you got newsprint there? Something you'll notice besides it, well, yeah, it is newsprint. It's like newspaper, but because it is. That is also is kind of gray compared to the creamy off-white color of the comparatively thicker and slicker drawing paper that we have. It's cheaper. Okay, so there's less of a you know, if you use a bunch of it, you don't feel like you've squandered any money compared to, you know, more expensive papers. But also it kind of makes a little bit of a difference in terms of value because it's a little grayer, right? We might take a piece of charcoal that we have around. Did anybody do any playing around with the charcoal just on scrap paper or in the sketchbook or anything like that last Monday?
I did.
Yeah, yeah, I recall you doing it. You were following along with me, and I was, in answer to one of the questions, I was like, make sure you're looking at the subject, make sure you're looking at the answer sheet, because I want to be like that about, you know, kind of the guy that jumps in and reminds you that just keep it about these two things, because it's really easy to get caught up in anything else. But you may notice right away that the interaction between the charcoal and the surface is different. You may even prefer it a little bit. But when you erase today, or any time that you're working on newsprint, be very careful, because it's really easy to tear it. Okay, that's a big thing. Is sometimes someone works for a long time on a charcoal drawing on newsprint, and then they, you know, are hitting it with the eraser and pushing, all of a sudden rip, you know, and a big tear in there. I have to tell them, like, well, it's not that bad, don't freak out, you know. But you can tear it pretty easy, especially if you're using, you know, some force to erase out an area. Now, what I've done, this took like a matter of moments, but it was really good fun. It's just with some really, I could have gotten a coffee mug. I could have gotten something I know that we all have. Even if your home is very sparely furnished and doesn't have a lot of stuff in it, it's very easy to come up with things like this. For example, takeout container here. A takeout container is, whether it's, no, this is styrofoam. Styrofoam is really bad. All this stuff's just ending up in the ocean, right? At least we could get paper, the paper ones, right? This one. Anyway, you probably just discard these kinds of things. I see the camera trying to focus on this like it's a face, which is kind of funny. But these kinds of things are around if you just look. So even if you don't have the particular thing that, or you could make something, which is like, I took a moment and I was like, well, I'm going to make something. So I've got some cardboard that is a gray tone, and I've got some paper that where I was cutting some other things out. So these were just the scraps, like I'm cutting some things out of paper, just off the, you know, it's printer paper. And I was cutting some things out, and so I have some strips. And I actually would encourage you, if you're inclined and you think it would be fun, because it kind of is, more than always looking at found objects. But you can use found objects too, as long as they seem to be simple and very light. Because what happens here in this kind of thing, where I've just taken some of these strips and I just use tape, like Scotch tape, is I've made some loops. Okay. And this is, of course, done more largely. Something to some degree or another, I've made variations of these kinds of things many times for classes. This is sort of like a half size or a quarter size version of something that I've made out of paper, and I've stapled it to the wall, and I've put lighting on it, okay? And lighting, which I talked a lot about, like hoping that you'll consider lighting for your still life. Everybody got, this is where you can thumbs up again. Everybody got side lighting, maybe, you know, or like some kind of, you know, you got something where you'll get some cast shadows. So I just turned on a little clip light at the side, and you can see like this cast shadow that's going through here. Now this is compromised a little bit because there's a window in the other room and there's an overhead light and that kind of thing. But I'm able to make sure that when I make something like this for students to look at and to draw, that, you know, the lighting creates cast shadows. That's all, cast shadows. So what we have here is, you know, I just fold one of these and I make a loop, and I made a twisty, you know, and so forth. And this is essentially kind of like a little model or maquette that took like no time whatsoever to throw together. I mean, nothing. But it stands for more complicated stuff. You could almost think of, if I make a single one of these loops, I have a model for a loop. A loop being a single example of what happens when something like cloth is folded over. So something like this is like a super simple example of curvature. You know, before I pin up the drapery and we do drapery studies, you know, we can get, and I'll do it with this really light stuff. And I like this too, because I might even lay this one down so I can look at it like that. You know, I can lay it parallel with me, and because that's kind of interesting to me too. It's all just form, right? And this is good because let me see if I can get this to lock. I'm just going to get this yellow thing to lock. There we go. So it won't try to go in and out of focus. So we have a really, really simple form. Everybody follow, like just taking a piece of paper and making one loop. Whereas if you start to do someone's t-shirt, there may be a lot of folds in it, right? With all kinds of different things going on. So, you know, we take one thing and we make a loop. Now, so you're welcome to do this with something like takeout containers. If you find anything that's really light in value and you can find cast shadows and it's simple, because I've got just a box. I have just a white box over here too. Your phone may have, your iPhone may have come in a box that is ideal, you know, because one side of it doesn't have anything printed on it or whatever. If you just do a little looking around, you're probably like, oh. But you also could take some printer paper and you could cut some strips and you could pin some, you know, you can make this. You don't need anything special. And you can say, well, have a little fun and make this. But if we are thinking about line, which we were doing on our first day, you know, we're going to do this kind of thing, right? But we know from the lesson last time that these aren't really there, okay? So big reminder, watch out for outlines. You do outlines when you do this, it gets in the way. So if I am drawing from my little thingy I made, you can do this with a half sheet. You can do this smaller. That will be helpful to you as well. So if you're feeling overwhelmed when you're in the middle of working on your still life from charcoal and you just want to do a little work that is not as involved, you can work on one of these little eraser drawings, little subtractor drawings. We'll also call them eraser drawings on newsprint. You also could do this first to warm up. either way, back and forth or before. But remember I was drawing boxes last time, you know? So this would just be basically a time to do some things like that. So if I've got an area, you know, maybe I'll draw on my newsprint something that approximates my little thing that I'm looking at. Just remember that this is not what I'm ultimately after, that it has to just stand for, like it's for me to start my drawing. Sometimes I'll say, don't even do that at all. Let's do something else first. Here's the big thing that it will make this different from your larger drawing, besides the fact that it's on newsprint. Everybody, you got your newsprint. Everybody's got one of these, right? Follow along with Mullins, okay? Everybody now, take one of these, and 1/2 of your newsprint, or on a rectangle that you've drawn that's about, you know, so big. Here's what I want us to do. In order to do these subtraction drawings, which are kind of quickies compared to your 18 by 24 still life. It's a simpler subject. You'll find that the paper and the charcoal interact slightly different. It may seem a little less messy because the paper is more porous and maybe you don't get as much dust. Some people prefer it. I think if I was doing those quick mushrooms or potatoes or something like that that I created as examples last time, I might prefer the newsprint. But make a, you know, it's a smaller work area, it's a smaller piece of paper, but make a, tone it. Turn your charcoal stick on its side and go around like this. And then with your paper towel, which you always have to have, you always have to have something like that. It's a really good idea. Then buff it. And Huron, I think about the question that you asked me. You asked me the question, and I quickly jumped in there and said, I know you're trying to follow along with me, but don't worry about that. What about the picture? Well, you know, because I want to make sure. I worry that you won't look at your subject as much as I want you to. I want you to always get your information from your subject. But the question that you asked was like, how did you get that sort of evenness or something? And I said, well, I worked it with my kneaded eraser, right? But be sure to work this. Like if I go in a buffing pattern, meaning round and round, kind of circular, I can get this pretty even. Everybody following along? Yeah, I see some people doing it. The few people that I can see are doing it. So yeah, there'll still be some streaks in it. There'll still be some kind of like marks that are like, because the stick is not perfectly straight. So you'll get these kind of like, you know, the edges of the stick will make some marks. But by going around like this, I can get an even value. I can get a shade of gray. And let's say, I don't know, 3/4, 75% gray. I don't want it to be like crazy, but you know, I might do this and I might say, okay, that's pretty good, but I'll give it another pass.
Yeah, it works really well.
So you may be appreciating how the, this is, remember I said there was a third category, but don't worry about it right now. What shape do I see? How light or how dark? What shape do I see? How light or how dark? But there is also in anything, what media are you using and what are you applying it to? You know, how is the surface interacting with, you know what I mean, what you got. There is that too. But I don't want you to have to worry about anything until shape and value are sort of like really there, really, until we really ingrain that so that when we are looking, we take in those pieces of information that way. So I'll make another pass and get this hopefully a step darker. And the reason I'm doing this is because if I'm asking for, you know, hey, don't do this the way you think you have to do it, or hey, don't do this the way you've always done it. Watch out for lines, don't do those, you know, and shave. This is actually facilitates that. Because if we have paper the way it comes and we're always taking a charcoal stick or a pencil, you know, it's always add. We always, you know, paper shows through, you know, we're working the other direction. We're taking this now and we're going to do everything by lightening. Instead of adding tone, we're going to lighten tones to match. So we're going to do shapes and values, but we're going to go the other direction, from dark to light. And this helps us to put the emphasis on shadow and light and these kind of things a little bit more than if I leave the paper the way it always is. You know, meaning if I'm going to ask you to use this less and use this more, thinking if this is a drawing tool, all of the things that I did say Monday, this will make it a little bit easier. So, so I can work this around. Now, I don't want to get it into a super point yet, okay? But I want to kind of work it around until I've got kind of a blunt. It's got a tip, but it's like kind of blunt, you know? And then I'm like, okay, well, here's what you don't do. Do not turn it up on its end and try to go like that and make lines with it. Okay, don't do that. No reverse lines, so we all make lines and lines happen to be, don't do that, it won't help. If you must, right where I was when I started, before we toned, if you must, because you're like, Mullins, I just feel so out of sorts, I don't know where things are, I've got to do something about edges, or it'll be too hard. Okay, cool, but minimize it, okay? How much do you need? And only what you need, only the major things. And this will be a little easier than on your full still life, because this is such a simple thing. It's a loop, right? Whereas something in your still life might be a simple thing, but it could have different parts, right? And be made up of more stuff. And what we'll find is when you give your undivided attention to simple things, soon enough you realize there's plenty going on just that. So so just enough, you know? And of course it's charcoal. So another thing that I belabored, and I belabor it because sometimes it just takes 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 times before I get it through my head. But if one of these is not right, I'll just change it. I can rub it out. I'll change it with the eraser. I got 2 shape tools, right? They're not line tools, they're shape tools. So by addition or by subtraction, if I see a difference between my answer sheet, my subject, and what I'm doing, I'll just make it so, just like that clay analogy right last time. So the first thing I've got to do, now that I've indicated 2 of these folds on my square, and I'm okay with that, I say, well, that's cool. The first thing I've got to do, just like I was saying last time, I don't know, who wants to try for a sticker? What's the first thing I should do? I got this in my hand now. I've indicated some edges, but I tried to keep it minimal. What should I do now? Who wants to tell me? If you were listening good last time, you probably could tell me what I should do first.
Start with the most general big shapes and try and get that, you know, on the page.
we have a sticker. We have a sticker awardee to Roy because, yeah, the big overall major shape. That will be easier for you to do in something like this, although it's always there. Even if I get something that's really complicated, you can do that. You can find an overall sort of, there's something, right? Even if it's like a cutout, you're just doing a big cutout sort of silhouette thing, or there's big stuff you can go to. And this is why general before the specific is your friend. If you are overwhelmed by the complexity of a subject, and you're just like, what am I going to do with that? That's too, approach it general before the specific. Try to reduce it and try to get this over, what is it in a general way? What is it overall? And that usually means like big shapes or one big shape or so forth. So in this case, well, yeah, I indicated the edges of one big shape. So I will try to match the value now of one big shape. So here I go. Just make a sticker note. There. Now, I've got this eraser and I'm trying to think of it as a shape maker. This is going to be good too, because this will help you, because you'll be taking the charcoal and you'll be trying to get an overall value for a particular thing in your still life. So this will be helpful for that. I think I probably did. It may make no difference. It certainly won't hurt. It might have been helpful that I switched the 2 days. We'll see. Now I'm working this around, and I want to make sure that when I do this, it's not too sketchy. By that I mean if it looks too much like that, I may not be getting my value even enough. Okay, so because before I begin to look at the particulars that are going on, and they are there, and maybe I want to, I might find myself doing something this to kind of get its end more round or more blunt, or maybe I want more of a point. You'll find that this happens when you're doing this and you're using it to make a shape, and that shape is lighter. So you'll find that you'll find yourself doing that to kind of get it, you can go any direction. Please push it all the way up to the edge. Make the whole shape. Don't leave an outline there, because that will just tend to be flattening and it's not really there. You just go all the way to the edge. All the way to the edge. That sounded kind of Bob Rossy right there. Go all the way to the edge. It's a happy little edge. Okay, yeah. And I pull this out and I get a lighter value. Now I could stop there and I could say like, well, there's my ribbon. That looks good, cool. Or I could try to make it even more even, because my ribbon isn't, it's not crumpled too bad or anything like that. And I don't want to have that sort of sketchy stuff, because the sketchy stuff will indicate it's not super meaningful. It's not really reflective of this form. And it actually shows up more on my screen than it does to my eye. Meaning this kind of stuff that's going on in there, I can see it more. I get more contrast. So I'm actually, with this being in a kind of round place, I'm actually going to go around circular way on it and back and forth and try to smooth out some of that stuff, because the stuff, what I'm looking at is fairly smooth and even value. And as I see that, so I want to make it so on my paper. And that's what this is all about. It's about seeing this and making it so here. And we know that to articulate what we see in our subject is about matching the shapes and matching the values. But we're working this other direction now. So that's making it interesting. It's very good for me. Very good thing that I'm doing for myself. Now, so I begin to start examining this more. And by the way, if my kneaded eraser gets really dirty and I turn to another place and it's clean and erases well, but if I need to, I'll just squeeze and pull and do all that, and I'll fold that dirty spot inside, and then my outside will be clean again, and it'll erase well again. And I can just keep doing that. Eventually, though, it'll get so charcoal, saturated that it's just over. But for now, all I've got to do is that, and it's clean again. So if it's not erasing well, and I feel like, a little annoyed because it's not erasing well, I'll just do that. And as I'm doing this, I start to notice areas of my ribbon that seem lighter or lightest of all. And as I notice that, I ask the question, well, what shape does that take? And maybe I notice a variation, like maybe I didn't get the perfect edges indicated when I did those little lines to get started. And if I notice that there's, it's a little wider there, or there's a little more, just all I have to do is take this and push it a little to the side. Here, I'll give you an example. Just show it, just change it, and you can go back and forth. Meaning, if I do something with this way of working and I find out it's not that, it's something else, I'll just rub it out, or I can just apply some charcoal back to it and buff it again with my paper, right? It can go on forever. As a matter of fact, sometimes just rubbing with my finger might affect it, but definitely at any time I can give it some of this action, or I can, I get as many chances as I want, basically. I can just keep working it as long as I want. I mean, I guess eventually I'll tear the paper, or I'll, wear a hole in it, but you get the idea, right? You're not having to settle at any point. You can just keep going. So that's what's cool about that, is I do this and I feel like I got all I could with the kneaded eraser. Maybe I can take this guy out, and maybe I can get one step lighter with this. Because the more variations in value that I accurately match, the better this is going to look. And already I might have the tendency to look at this and start thinking about if this is coming out good, or if this is any good, or if this, and that's a waste of my time, because this always follows that, right? So I better make it so. Now I've got to be a little careful here, because I'm actually, with the angle I'm looking at it, it's different. So if I set it like that, it could give you the wrong idea. I'm not looking, my camera is looking straight down at my setup. I'm not, okay? So that's why I keep this out of the way, because if I just do this, you might get confused and say, hey, you're not matching that. Okay, but this is being shot by my camera. I'm down lower. Just a reminder. So yeah, cast shadows. Find them, talk about them, match the values. There will be, and so if I need to add some tone back, I'll use this. If I need to pull something out, I'll use this. This is a lot of fun. That's why I made several loops, because one by itself is not as fun, and then there's the shadows that these throw, and this is really where it gets good, and you can create a sense of 3 dimensions, is by talking about the shadows cast. So don't just, in keeping with the negative space lesson, don't just work on the thing. Look at the spaces in between, all that. So I've got some gray cardboard, so I'll have it, that's cool, because I'll have to try to get a gray, and then I'll have to try to get my ribbon as light as I can. And I'll probably run up against the limitations of the erasing, and because this paper is lighter than my newsprint, right? I'll talk more about that in a minute. But like, what is this gray, and what is it, and the shadows are darker and all that. because those are the two things that this is a game of match with. It's a game of matching the shape and matching the value as per Monday's lesson. The difference is here, we're going to do almost all of this with the eraser, because most of my subject, since I got light paper from the printer, most of my subject is lighter than the tone I started with. So you get the idea of the subtractive drawing. Is what if we start with an overall value? See, this wouldn't work as well if my subject was this tripod, right? But since my takeout container or my paper are very light, I can do most of my work with the eraser, and that's giving you good practice, right? So we tone the page, and we get a subject that's light in value, and we struggle with trying to pull stuff out. And if you do it right, if you match a lot of values and a lot of shapes right, it'll look like it's popping out of your page. It may not at first, and you may not even notice that it's happening. You may have to look at it from far away, but you will create volume if you do this right. For example, let me just turn my thing a different way, because I want to get some juicy loops. I want to exemplify some loops. Well, maybe I should finish up this, whatever, it doesn't matter. Remember I was saying earlier that, like, I mean, what have I got in this? I got like a matter of minutes in this, and it's not so precious. So very similar to what I was saying about the, when we're doing that network of lines all over the place in the beginning of a line drawing, is to not get too, you know, you're not stuck. You don't have to live with that the rest of your life. This is a very good thing to do, I think, which is to just do that. It's all right, you know. I wasn't like doing this out of like gold. I wasn't doing it with a hammer and chisel. I am just trying to, you know, all that kind of stuff. So I think that's a really healthy thing to do. And if you do that at some point on your still life drawing, and don't feel like, oh my gosh, I lost all this time, because you probably didn't, you know, compared to the amount of time I spend messing around on the stupid internet, it's no time, okay, zero. And my drawing is not to be regarded as this like thing I need to be afraid of, and it's like super, super precious, and I need to be super careful and all that. I don't want you to think that way. So let's do another one. Let's do a loop. Now this time, instead of doing those lines, I'll just jump in with my eraser, but I'm not going to make lines. I'm going to make a shape. Okay, that looks like a line, but it's the edge of my shape. Okay, what shape do I see? I see a shape about like this. And I'm going to try to get it solid, because if I have too much sketchy stuff, it'll look like something else. They got to make it match what I see, right? So there may be some subtleties, there may be, you know, but I don't want abruptions all over the place. I want them just where I see them, right? So I don't want to change in value unless I see a big change in value. So establish this shape of this loop. It's cool because it is like pulling it out, you know, from the dark. And light and dark and shadow and light is what this is all about. Okay, I worked negatively. I worked around that because there's a cast shadow there. So, you know, I've got something there, and I can sort of see differences already between little things that aren't 100% exact about my loop and the loop that I'm doing this from. So I will just nudge this using my tools here. If I can see it, I can make it so. If I can see that my hole in there, let's say I'm looking in there, and because that's negative space, let's say I look in there, and you know, the shape I see in there, it's not between there. I got a lot more than what I see. Well, What do I see? And I look at that whole, maybe it's a little more, oh, you know what? It's a little more like, you know. So I study that negative space. Of course, I don't have to worry about my arrow that I drew for your benefit. I just have to get rid of that line now. But if it's not that, it's this, I can make it so. So let me make that a solid shape. If I can see it, and I can say it, well, through this shape matching thing, I can get it more accurate. And doing that kind of thing, like making changes, I think is very good. You know, so I adjusted the value. I may have that a little darker than it actually is now. I don't know for sure. I got to compare these things to know. A really light going over sometimes will actually get the value a little more correct. And I want to smooth out all this sketchy stuff a little bit more. And then I'll go forward. One other thing I can do is these things you got, they're paper stomps, are also called tortillons in fancy art language. You guys got these, right? In your kit? So I can get these. They don't let out anything. They don't erase. They don't let out, you know, graphite or anything. They're just compressed. You know, it's a paper stomp. So I can use them. You know, this is, again, I'm getting kind of specific here, right? But just know that later on, if you don't feel you can, you know, you can get refinement with those later. So I'm either adding, if I think my value needs to be a little darker, let's say I've got a cast shadow and it's definitely, you'll see this. There'll be times where there'll be a really hard edge. And there'll be times where you feel like I can see that plain as day. There's an edge there and the cast shadow comes off and all I got to do is, and it's like makes a little half moon triangle like that. I can imitate that shape, no problem, cool. Other times it'll be gradual. That's what happens in these curves. So sometimes you'll have like contrast and you'll have a hard edge, and sometimes you'll have something trickier. Okay, but just keep studying it. Have faith in the process. Process being, what shape do I see? How light or how dark? Match the shape, match the value. Okay, now if I'm doing this and I'm getting comfortable, because using the stick and adding darker stuff is like how I always drew before, I may have to stop myself, catch myself, and pull myself back to using the eraser. Okay, because what will happen is if I do everything with this charcoal stick, is I'll create something that it may turn in space, it may begin to have volume, it may look good, but it also may be, you know, nowhere near as light as my subject. Okay, matter of fact, I'm going to have trouble getting, since the newspaper is not really light anyway, it's not like pure white paper or whatever, I may be coming up short of getting what I want anyway with you know, with my lightning. So I like to encourage, you know, a lot of eraser work and less work with the stick. Okay, there'll be times you want to add some value or you just want to put some tone back and then adjust it, sure. But try to do as much as you can with erasing. Oftentimes on something like curved piece of paper, you get a stripe. Everybody see that? So if I got shapes that are lighter still that happen in my folded paper. I want to make those. And then once I do that, I realize, oh yeah, all of a sudden that stuff I got dark looks really dark. And I need to get back on the, I need to get back into lightening stuff up. I was getting carried away. It's easy because I'm used to sticking my hand and making stuff darker on my paper. I'm not so used to lightening. So be sure that you don't have outlines. Watch out for those darn outlines, you know, and yeah, use the eraser. And don't worry about going too far. If I go over this whole thing and erase, it only takes a second to put something back. It's very, you know. All right, I want to do something different, make some more examples. Because one example, you know, what's that? So anyway, let's buff this back. Just add some tone on its surface and get a paper towel. Make this more even. There may be a ghost of what I did that's there, but it'll be subtle. I'll just go right over it. Let's get this other one out that I made, which is more geometric. So you'll remember last time I was making some cubes and I was making some squares, whatever. So these have just sharp creases in it, you know, to look at as opposed to curves. And I'll do some more boxy-like things this way. Not unlike the example I made when I said 1, 2, 3 last time. I'm trying to get comfortable and familiar with using this as opposed to using a sharpened to a point thing. And work this around to a clean spot and make some shapes. You know, maybe I just need to pass over an area a little bit to get a squarish type shape, a little lighter than my paper, or maybe I got another shape, and if I erase it out more, then that's appropriate. And maybe I've got a shape in there and it's a hole, so light really isn't getting in there as much. And if I don't need to hit that. I need to hit do this because that's the truth, you know. So this value in the negative space, because they're all the same, right? The holes, the background, it's not like, well, this is the thing, and then I otherwise like whatever. No, it's all values and it's all shapes. So I think this could be really useful to you folks who are new to this charcoal stuff, new to this eraser thing, new to this shape notion, to do some of these subtractive drawings from not super complex things in tandem with before, or, you know, you could take a break from your still life. But, you know, the whole thing is to see your still life like this. You know, it might be bigger, it might have more elements or all that, but keep it boring at first. Don't go to the details. Those are small shapes. Put those off, okay? And establish big overall. I'll show you some student examples. And one of the things that I'll point out is how hard it can be to sort of keep the big overall value changes. When people start putting in details and smaller things, oftentimes they have to worry and be careful that they don't take away those differences that they had in the beginning, which are structural and important. It's just really easy to give everything the same treatment I mean, it's amazingly easy. So these simpler things, you know, like I made a little paper structure model is what I did. And everything has a structure. Objects we get are variations on geometric structures or curves. You know, they're all based on the cylinder or the cone or the, you know, cube or all that. So by doing some simple little variations on that, you know, then whatever we've got in our setup. And of course, you may have organic things in your setup. And then again, that's like that potato example. Potato is a potato or a mushroom or something like that is a simpler organic form. But if you put a potted plant into your setup, you know, you're drawing away on a more complex organic subject. Yeah, drawing with the eraser. Yeah. Fun. Working from dark to light. And working with value rather than line. We're really comfortable with line. Line's an old friend. We're used to line. We understand it thoroughly. But value's cool too, right? I'm going to do a little softening here. Because now that I've got these other things in there, I think to myself, well, maybe this could come up a little bit too. It's very easy to want to just darken. I think last time I was talking about, you know, where in the value range we tend to be weakest and how it's not the max light, but in the subtle lights, like in that side of the gray scale, you know, that's where we tend to skip. And in general, we tend to make stuff darker than we need to. We tend to look at stuff and just go too far, you know, and miss the subtleties that are often there. Now, I have in my hand now Conte crayon. Do you have some Conte crayons in your kit? Are there any Conte? Chances are you got a little box and it's got like this and it has a brown and like a reddish brown and a brown and it has one of these, right? And I just broke this in half because, as I kept saying, my newspaper is kind of grayish, right? So I've erased and I've erased and I've erased, and I've even got out the retractable eraser pen, which is harder. And I erase and I erase and I erase. But what I end up with looks like blank newsprint with a little bit of charcoal rubbed down into its fibers. I'm going like this because there's a lot of eraser grit, okay? And it's still like, you know, so, but if I take this, now don't do this if you haven't erased enough. If you erase only so far and there's still charcoal there, it'll look blue, okay? Because it'll mix. But if I erase and erase and erase and I still want to pull something out a little bit more, I can heighten with chalk, okay? Which is something that, you know, you can easily see examples in old master drawings, you know, by some, you know, heightened with white chalk, it'll say, or, you know what I mean? But basically what it means is the paper was like gray or something and they used some chalk to pull out something. So you can just work this around. Now be careful because it can be, you know, I've been doing all this smudging and all of this. Be careful. Do it with care. It's very easy to get carried away. But, you know, try to make things solid if they look solid, you know, and pull it out a little bit more. But only if you've erased all you can erase and you can't erase anymore, because, like I said, if there's still some charcoal there, it'll mix and it'll get kind of a blue look that you may not like. But this will be a value lighter than the newsprint tends to be automatically, so you can work a little bit further with your subtraction. or going from dark to light, right?
Professor Mullins, I
Yes.
have a question. So, so when I use the pointed eraser, I feel after I do something on my drawing, then there's like strikes. And even though I use my fingers to smudge it, it's still like I can see
Yeah.
there's.
Yeah. So try. I mean, there may be some of that no matter what you do, right? But if you want to try to even it out, work the kneaded eraser around into more of a ball, like, get a clean place and work it around to kind of like a ball. And then go over that, like I'm doing here, go over that in a kind of a circular. Like if you feel like you got marks going, like slashy marks in your eraser work, just get more of like a ball-like form on the kneaded eraser and work it around in a circular motion and see if you can't soften that stuff, because you probably can. Like buffing it around in a circular way. Can everybody see what's going on here? Right? Okay, now your big still life that you're doing, still life number 2, is on your drawing paper, right? It's not on this newsprint. So you'll see some differences. You'll be able to get lighter, probably than the newsprint will permit. But you also may find that more dust comes, that the surface doesn't let the charcoal go down into the fibers quite as much, or something like that. More dust will fall off of the surface. That's all good. But if you're really seeing value in shape, and you're just giving this your undivided attention, and then you're looking at, well, what sits inside of, I've got major shapes established, but something sits inside of it, or something, what's in there. You should be able to do some pretty good, models and fun. What have you got in your still life? Let me do a survey. Henry, what have you got in your still life? What objects are we going to be drawing?
I have a container of laundry detergent, box of envelopes. Not sure what that thing is. A little container of things, a glasses case, a hole puncher, and a remote.
And would you say that overall these objects vary, like they're different shades of gray overall?
Yeah, some of them aren't gray though.
Well, they don't have to be gray because they're in
I would say they are for the most of them are varying colors from each other.
Yeah. I mean, you're in color, so like, but if it, like, in terms of light and dark, there's a good variation, right? And of course, sometimes when it's like a color, it's like, well, what value would that be, right? And that's the whole point, is because we're trying to develop our ability to study those values. Huron, what you got? What do you have in your still life?
Last time I had a tree house. This time I'm thinking of drawing some furnitures.
Yeah, furniture has structure, and it almost always provides negative space. Is it really big?
It's a chair and a table.
Do you have enough distance between you and the furniture?
Yeah.
Yeah. That it will end up being a good size on your paper?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. And do you think you have a good variety of value?
So the furniture is black and white mostly, but I think because my apartment has big windows, so I think if I can adjust the sunlight going into the room, I can create different kind of shades.
Good. If you consider the lighting, you can probably get some really good, because you want the full range of values, is why I'm asking about this. What we find with these like little things that I've made that I'm working from today is that, well, I would look at it and I would say like, well, it's just the same. But if I'm really looking, then all of a sudden I'm like, no, the shadows are creating all this variation, right? So if you've got furniture and it's, you know, got a cast shadow going across it, you're going to have some value changes, right? Moving along. Aurelia, what's in your still life?
So I've got it's a record player with an LP propped up on top of it, and a dehumidifier and an iron.
Okay. So I know that the LP, you know, is going to be on one side of the value scale, and I bet that dehumidifier is on the other.
Yeah.
Overall, right?
Yeah. So it's like there's a lot of shininess and see-through stuff, and like the LP has like some white sections and some black sections. And the record player has a see-through top, but it's sort of a grayed brownish see-through with a brown floor. And the actual place where the vinyl spins is black.
Right. Right. So we got shapes and we got values, right? We got some, we're going to be mixing it up. And if we play with the light, we'll get some interesting cast shadows too, right? So yeah. Two ways that you can approach. I'll keep going with what I'm doing here, just demonstrating, because I think you can tell me if you agree. But I could talk and talk and talk. But I think the best thing is to do as much show as I do tell, or to tell while I show, you know, because it's a visual stuff, right? So seeing is kind of like is kind of important, right? Let's see. Let me take one of these containers, you know. So maybe you've got something like this that you found or that you had and you were about to throw it away and you're like, oh, wait a minute, you know. Suddenly, since I have an art class, single-use disposable stuff not only, you know, it still bothers me ecologically, but maybe there's a nice structure there from our art class. So hold on before that goes into the you know, bin. Maybe I'll do one of these studies from it. So let me clear some space here, or rather just move a few thingies, and we'll keep going with this, making exemplars of this kind of thing. Okay. Just move that over out of the way. Set this before me. Okay. Remember when I was talking and I really quickly sort of tossed out a mushroom or a 10-second potato or something. So, and then I was doing a picture, and folks were following along. How about this? So in addition to toning the page, please try some of this stuff where you begin negatively, working negatively. All of a sudden, my not so complicated, you know, takeout thing. I'm talking about styrofoam. I can remember when everything was styrofoam, every coffee cup. Now I'm dating myself here. Okay. Letting you know just how ancient I am, but I can remember when a Big Mac or a quarter pounder came in styrofoam. The styrofoam coffee cups were just, those are still around, but you don't see them everywhere, you know, like styrofoam. And it's the worst, you know, it's just the worst. But I can remember a time in which, you know, if you got anything, it seemed to come in that stuff. Okay, so I'm just sort of indicating this kind of stuff and then taking a paper towel and Because again, if you got these, this is very important actually. If you got these dots because you just made a single swipe with the charcoal, never, I mean, you might leave it like that because it's a quick sketch or whatever, or you might leave an area like that. I'll probably show you some portraits that other students have done where you can find areas like that where you're still seeing the just a swipe. But chances are you're going to want to not settle for that and adjust your stuff that you've applied to get more, you know, more solid tones, right? So if I put down some charcoal and it has that kind of look, chances are I'm going to want to work the charcoal and I'm going to want to adjust the values. And by doing so, you know, you won't see so much of that kind of look. Everybody see that? See the difference between the first swipe and if I just work it, you know, rub it or smudge it, or so everybody see that? Don't just accept, you know, I mean, you might get a swipe and you might be, that's cool, perfect, I'm letting it be. But chances are you're trying to make something look like something else that you see. And that something else says like, you know, it doesn't have texture, it's smooth or whatever. So you don't want paper showing through because paper is partially showing through. So just plan on working that charcoal, adding to it, taking away. And of course, in this instance, the big lesson is subtraction, okay? So everybody understands what I did here and why I did that. I worked kind of clumsily, but I worked around this styrofoam container rather than outlining it, I did that and I sort of carved it out. But now I'm going to add a little tone. And this tone will sort of work as my shadows, largely. And I'll use my eraser to lighten. And I'll use my Conte crayon to lighten. And I'll draw like that. So I'll make sure that I'm working towards the light too. And I'll try to start with bigger shapes and try to work overall on this thing and establish that big stuff and then work my way down all the time. What shape do I see? What value? But as per that diagram that was on the dry erase board when we started, big to small is always a good way to go. So if it's really particular and you'll find that you know, using a stick of charcoal and a kneaded eraser makes it hard for you. It's harder to get picky anyway, right? So we'll just put getting picky off and we'll try to see what we can do by getting some bigger things spot on, you know, what that will get us. And as per Monday's lesson, being as interested in the values matching as the shapes. But we'll tend to be like shape fixated because that's closer to what we're used to. The shape work is closer to line work. You know, that's where the shape work is about edges, you know, so. But we're asking ourselves to be as interested in value as anything, if not the most. So what that means is, it means, again, something I was talking about Monday, if you imagine that you're trying to match what it is, if it's out of focus, you know, like let your drawing be out of focus at first. You don't have to tighten the focus immediately. You can draw it as if it's blurry. And when you're doing that, when you're drawing something as if it's blurry, you know, the values you can still match them. This is very helpful when working in full color because you can put your emphasis on matching the colors first, you know, and you can refine the shapes later. It's always easy to tighten up. It's always easy to get really picky. We have to kind of tell ourselves to stay big and to stay general, you know. But I want you to do that, because if you do that, you will stay in this place, not, you know, similar to what I was asking or hoping for you with the network of lines at the start of that drawing, you know, is that like, well, I really screwed this up, I'm done. No, I can just keep pushing back and forth, you know. So if I've got awkwardness, which I do, with where I've put things on this, if it looks kind of like, you know, out of whack, I can just, it's a charcoal drawing. I can just keep changing this and shoving it around. Like maybe I haven't pinched this enough in the back. Maybe this, you know, well, I can get that right. The more I, you know, the more I observe some information about a particular shape and make it so, the more correct it will get. But what we find is we want to just jump to the end. We like want to know what happens at the end of the story. We want to just, you know, but we can stay in the structure part. We can stay in the rough cuts of the sculpture for a long time. We don't have to go to the polish immediately. So, and keep nudging our subject closer to a rightness with observations about the lightness and or darkness of the values. And the accuracy of the shapes. And if I go too far, I can always just put something back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, and so on and so on. Now, I'll do one of these things again, just to sort of make the point once more, because you will probably have a tendency, or at some point in working on your drawing, idea that we're going to do something drawing, well, you know what, I'm not satisfied with how this looks. I'm going to do something, you know. And then I go and I put some lines on it. Charcoal stick, and you can see, I don't want to do that, you know, like, no, you know, that's too much. That's not, you know what I mean. So just once again, resist the urge to outline, you know. If the value is not, you know, it's not a line, it's a skinny shape, right? There's some skinny shapes on my container there, but they're not like that. See how that just looks like marks on the surface? Okay. So watch out for that, and watch out for taking the eraser, you know, and making lines with it. They won't convince. It won't become part of the form. It won't look like it's, you know, whatever it is. So just know that, okay? If you do that, just soften them, push them back, and then find out what's going on. There's some skinny shape there that you're actually seeing. And if you match, it may be, you know, we might say, well, that's a line. It looks like a line, you know what I mean? But there's something a little more going on. And if you get the value more right and you add that little variation to it, it won't be as bad. Okay, but marks on the surface is what you'll get if you just try to outline, okay? Now, your setup has variety. I asked some folks like what they had, and Henry said laundry detergent. And I was just looking today at a laundry detergent container in my house, and I thought, well, that'd be good, but I want to take that label off, you know? So a note about things like that. If I'm doing this and I get too interested in this flat, you know, but printed sort of thing, it says Scotch, it could get me in trouble, all right? So don't worry about things that are printed on the surface, particularly. It'll be extremely hard to match and to do. They can be done, but you know, you could remove a label, or you could just turn it to where that's not what's featured, you know, because for the most part, they don't contribute to the structure, and they tend to suck us in, and you know, we spend all this time, you know, just making something that, you know, so if you got, you know, if you got something printed on a surface, you might just leave it off. Oftentimes what I tell people is like, well, you can just do like, you know, labels would be square if they were totally flat, but since they're wrapped around something, they have a shape, and just do that shape. And otherwise you don't have to worry about what's printed on it, you know. But if it's easy enough, you can remove a label from something, you know, and just take it out of your way, you know. So some more subtractive drawings. I'll just add some tone. Now, does anybody have any charcoal pencils? I don't think those are in the kit per se, right? Sometimes, again, it's like, well, you think they're for lines because they're pencils, right? It's in a sheath of wood, and you sharpen it up. Although if you put a charcoal pencil in your pencil sharpener, most of the time what it does is break off, you know, and you got a chunk in there you have to get out because it's jammed up. It's very hard to, you know, and you really, the way to sharpen charcoal pencils is often just to take a knife and to kind of, you know, sharpen, and that's a whole other sort of thing. But if you get your stick worked around, you got a point on it, you can make small shapes, okay? Many of my students like to take the charcoal pencils out to do small shapes and little bits, but it can be done with a stick. And I think, you know, doing it that way, like sort of forcing, because you can really see a small shape and you really want to match it, and you have to get that out of the stick, can be, it's like you learn something that way, you know, like in painting. If you got a bigger brush and you're trying to do something small and you're really having to sort of like work it to make that shape, as opposed to just pulling it and, you know, you get whatever that brush makes automatically. I think you kind of learn something that way. Whereas if you got an itsy bitsy little brush, you don't necessarily, you know. So if you have something in your hand and it feels like maybe it's a little too big for an area, but you have to like figure it out and get that shape matched, that probably makes you learn. But I don't know if that's true. Having like a really sharp pointed object trying to fill in something bigger, I don't know if that does, but okay. So I'm going to try to combine the two examples I just made on another object of this subtractive drawing. Which will be a pain, right? How do I draw stuff that I can see through, right? I went through all that last time. Like, how do I draw metal? How do I draw plastic? It's all the same if you can see the shapes and you can match the values. There's two things I can match: shapes and values, right? So What shape? How light or how dark? As I look at this thing, and I'll probably have some challenges doing this, but it's cool because I can just shove it around and move it, and if it's not perfect, I get another go. Always get another go. Anybody ever have an Etch-a-Sketch when you were a kid? You ever have one of those little things with sand in there, and you turn these knobs to make those little drawings? Do you ever have that? The thing of it is you could shake it, and it would all just go away, and you could start over. And it was always like cool that you could do that and use it, but it was also sort of like felt tragic when your drawing was gone. I feel like this is like that, but but without the tragic part. Like charcoal, you can just like rub it out and give it another go if you don't want to keep it, but you didn't have to make it by like working these knobs and like, you know. So most of what I got here, I put a few things in where I thought darker areas would be, but most of this again is going to be lighter than so we'll work around some stuff and we'll just do some shape studying here. I'll try to do most of this with the eraser. All right, somebody show me some drawings that you've been making. Who will hold up to the screen? Show me a drawing. Somebody that's been drawing. Say, yeah. So that you pop up and hold her up here a little closer. Push that in a little closer. Yeah, good. Somebody else. Show me something you've been working on. Make a noise so that you come into the speaker view.
Yeah,
Yeah, hold it up a little higher. Yeah, a little higher, a little higher. Yeah. Oh, it's a mask. I've been seeing lots of that kind of stuff too. Like, oh, look at that. I know he's not actually got the still life there though. He's like he's following along with me. Yeah, masks, Clorox wipes, you know. Pandemic still lifes.
Okay.
Grubhub bag, you know, or something. And so hopefully this, you know, doing these little studies subtractively, I'm not crazy about this one I've got going here. It needs a lot of work. It needs a lot more solidity too. I think I've been sticking around letting the transparent nature of some things make me avoid some of these shapes. And noticing that, I'll try to put some things in more solid, but hopefully the, sort of putting down a block of tone, for your whole little piece of paper idea will, because I want everybody to sort of like get a big block of tone for all the major shapes of the things that are in there set up. And of course that includes negative spaces and backgrounds and things like that too. So don't forget that. Okay. But, sometime during, before, concurrent with, or whatever, do a few of these eraser drawings. That's what a subtractive drawing is an eraser drawing. Do a few of these. And of course, now you know that if you erase and you erase and you erase and you want to get lighter still, you can take out your Conte crayon and lighten up even more. Or if you have like a little shiny spot, which a lot of things do, you can put really small shapes in that way. Okay. And that can be really satisfying. And don't feel when you're doing stuff like this, like these subtractive drawings, I'd rather you do more of them than less, because there's more value, not value like we're always talking about like shades of gray, I mean like worth. There's a lot of worth in doing lots of them. Like for me to think that I'm going to do one of these and it's going to be a masterpiece, I'll be happy if I do one and I think it's good. But the experience is a big important thing too, the process. So do one, and whatever happened. Of course, you're always remembering what's good to do, okay? But do something like that, because they don't take all that much time, and do another one, and then do another one, and do another one, and sort of get that under your belt. Because if you just keep, now of course you can, it's charcoal, you really can keep changing it forever, which is great. But obsessing about the perfection of one of these little drawings is not as valuable as doing many of these little drawings, okay? Because doing one and then doing another and doing another and doing another and getting that practice in will benefit you more than eternally trying to make your first one right, okay? So just know that when you see work and it looks really good, you're probably seeing the result of, there's been a buildup of lots of drawing and lots of working that way behind it. So resist that tendency, much as we want to make a sort of little perfect kind of thing. And of course, when you're working on it, you're trying to get things right and so forth. But don't mess with one forever or get hung up on it and sort of, just do, find something else and have another go at it, do another drawing. That's study for you. And please remember that when you're working in your sketchbook too. Once again, you don't always have to make a miniature finished drawing. Make another one. Do something quick, keeping everything that's important in mind. But, you're not sketching if you're trying to make a miniature masterpiece. Okay, so sometimes when I'm doing painting stuff and I do stuff like this and I'll wipe out a whole bunch of paint and I get reactions from students like, oh my gosh. But don't see it as precious, okay? Don't see it as, push through that, okay? And do another. I know that you've got an 18 by 24 still life that you're going to hand in, but on newsprint with the eraser, these eraser drawings, give me several, okay? What you'll probably find is that the more you do, the better they get, okay? You might have one, well, Well, no, my third one really came out bad, you know, but for the most part, the more you do it, the better it gets. If you just keep messing with the first one eternally, you're not going to probably get the same experience you have if you get something else and you try another. Okay, so let's see. Subtractive drawings. Everybody got the idea, right? So I'm gonna go to another thought. I went this, you got a week before you have to send over. You see there it says your still life number 2 in charcoal is due on the 30th, right? You can go to the 30th, you can see there, charcoal still life due. Okay, so just looking ahead, sketchbook, negative space studies. Everybody knows how to do that, right? Draw the holes. Don't draw the positive, draw the negative, draw the holes, draw the spaces in between. So some subtractive drawings on newsprint, some negative space studies in your sketchbook, and of course anything else you want to do in your sketchbook. And this charcoal drawing, right? That's going to be amazing. I can't wait to see. So then on Monday, next week on Monday, it says continue working on your charcoal still life. And I'm going to show you something really, really awesome with the demonstration on Monday, because it's basically taking all this stuff that I've introduced. We started with it last time, basically shape and value. Once you pull that out and you're working with graphite, I'll show you some really cool things. And then a week from today, this is due, the charcoal still life is due, and I'll talk about your homework that will be for critique, right? So, everybody on track, on target? Questions about shape, value, charcoal drawing, erasers, needed erasers, any of it?
One quick question. The negative space drawings are what you did with the styrofoam box, I think, where you drew around it. And
the negative space drawings, okay, great, good question. Negative space drawings were the ones, I always think they look like lace or doilies or something like that, but this is going to be fiction. But once I get enough going, you'll be like, oh yeah, that stuff. Negative space drawings are when, and you want to fill them in, you'll probably make something more crisp than this. But you remember those stools, right?
oh,
Remember that handout, there was a stool, right? And then, yeah, negative space is when you're like, okay, I'm drawing a stool and I'm going to put a box around it so I don't have to extend it forever. And instead of drawing on the thing itself, I'm going to work around it and through it, so I can draw the shape that abuts it. I can draw the hole, but I don't want to work on the thing per se. Now I'm doing this real fast and real sloppily, right? But in theory, my stool will come out pretty accurate in reverse silhouette if I get my holes right, and if I'm doing that. Those are the negative space studies. Some of the best, just like with contour, handbags are like serious contour staples, furniture is up there for negative space. But anything where you can see, I'm actually looking now to my right, and yeah, I see a bunch of stuff that would be good for negative space. You can create negative space really easily just by putting a few things, if something's in front of something, You know, like if I was going to work on you right now, I'm probably work negatively around your the cord to your headset. You know, so you know, don't feel like I have to do a piece of furniture, although those are very given to negative space studies. Did I give the example that had a little baby carriage, the antique baby carriage? You could see it in the background. Is that turned up yet? Maybe it has, but I'll probably put it on the recap handout that I send here tomorrow or the next day when I do a week 4 recap handout. Okay. So in your sketchbook, some negative space, some eraser drawings. Neither of these things take too much time. The bulk of your time is going to go on to your still life, which is going to look magnificent, right? Am I going to get any thumbs up emojis from this? The charcoal still lifes are going to look so good that I'm going to be dazzled. As a matter of fact, my faith in people is going to be restored from these charcoal still life drawings that you're going to send over to me. They're going to make me so happy that my general crestfallen feeling that I have about the state of things will go away, and I'll have a renewed confidence, right? Where's my thumbs up emojis and my nods and my, oh, I got some smiles though. I got some smiles. These charcoal drawings, no, really. Those smiles remind me of like when I turn to a class and I say, because usually I don't make people, you know, show me what they're doing every week, you know. You know, I'll be like, you working in your sketchbooks? And I'll get those same smiles. Why is that? You know, that smiles often you, oh yeah, I've been working in my sketchbook, Mullins. You bet, you know. You know, but you might find that if you remember the little diagram and you do all the big stuff first and you spend a lot of time with the big shapes and you work your way down to the middle shapes, and in that time, although you may not be dazzling yourself necessarily because you want to go to little shapes and you want to do something that's very refined to you know, to believe that things are coming out well, you may find that if you stay with the program, that shape and value will really you know, they'll be good to you. What shape do I see and how light and how dark? Shape and value. Good friends.